So glad to be here. I'm Deedee Wills, and we're going to talk a little bit about decodable text today. We're going to talk about how we use these in our small group setting. So let's go ahead and get started. First, to let you know about me, my name is Deedee Wills. I blog on a blog called Mrs. Wills Kindergarten. That's my husband, Mark. We've been married for about 31 and a half years. Perfect son and the perfect fiance. And then we have Ozzy and Harriet. So if you hear some strange sounds behind me, they snore like cartoon characters. They are so loud. So if you hear that, it's not my stomach growling, it's them snoring. So anyhow, let's go ahead and get started. So I wanted to let you know, and many of you I know have gone through some science of reading, but I just wanted to refresh some information that I think is really important when we start to think about small group instruction and why we want to change some things. So 1 in 5 students, or 15 to 20% of the population, has a language-based learning disability. And 38% of our 4th grader students are reading below basic in their reading skills. They are at or below the 40th percentile for their age group. So if we look at this data, we know that 15 to 20% of the population has an identified language-based learning disability, and yet 38% of our 4th graders are below the 40th percentile. So there's a percentage of the population who have maybe a mild language-based learning issue, but they haven't been identified, right? And so if we're having 38% of our students not being proficient in reading and writing by the time they get to the 4th grade, we need to do something different. So the way we've been teaching reading not only hurts the way that we are teaching our students with a language-based learning disability, it really hurts those who have not yet been identified as having a learning disability. So first, I want to introduce you to 2015 Deedee Wills. 2015 Deedee Wills thought she knew what was best practices for teaching reading, and it was guided reading. So that's my friend Kim Adsit, my friend Deanna Jump. So maybe you're familiar with those people. This was taken in 2015. So in 2015, I was going all over the country and I was talking about guided reading, and these would be some of the prompts that I would ask students to think about or use when they got stuck on a word they didn't know. So point to the picture or point to the words. That would be one of them. Check the picture and see if that helps you. Get your mouth ready. Stretch out the sounds you hear. Look for the chunks you know. Maybe flip the vowel sound. Skip over the word. Come back and see if you can think about what would make sense. So those are some of the strategies. Some people know them as the Beanie Baby strategies, right? Chunky monkey, stretchy snakes. Some of those are okay. Those are okay, but they're not specific enough. And I'm going to kind of walk through what I have learned since and what I would suggest doing instead. So 2015 Deedee Wills believed that we would be having readers lean into meaning, structure, and visual cues if they got stuck on a word. And that would be how they would help to decipher words that they didn't know. So I'm just going to kind of go through the MSV is another way that we talk about it, and let you know really quickly how that would play into figuring out a strategy to figure out unknown words. So if they were stuck on a word, we might prompt them to use meaning. And so we might ask them, what word did make sense in this sentence or in this section of the text? If they were looking at structure, we would ask them to think about the structure of a sentence. And if they put a word in there that didn't make sense, or if they're trying to think of a word that would make sense, we'd ask them to think about the structure of the sentence and put a word in there and ask ourselves, did that sound right? And then visual, we might ask them to get their mouth ready and then see if that matches. Another visual in those pre-reading ages, kindergarten, maybe even 1st grade, we would ask them to look at the picture. And so 2015 Wills really thought she knew what she was doing, and that's how I not only taught my students to read, but I also was an instructional coach, and I spent like 4 years learning about guided reading and trained a whole district on it as well, plus professional development. So it is true that proficient readers use the text meaning, structure, and visual information to read, but the work our brains do with these 3 sources of information is really different than we originally thought. So we ask ourselves, do we really need to read each letter? So take a look at that right there in front of you and type in the chat what you think that sentence says. And I'm just going to give you a moment. And I don't even know if I can see the chat, but I know that Rochelle, who introduced us, knows how to. Let me see if I can actually see your responses. It's probably good that I don't, because I get really bogged down by listening to questions and stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and give you the answer. So, well, I just went past it, didn't I? So basically this says, today we will look at data. And you're able to read that, even though you don't need to see each of those letters, because we can read it because our brain has already learned the visual patterns of these words. So we as adults can read it because we already know, or we have already orthographically mapped those visual patterns. But a student who has not mapped those visual patterns would really suffer from that by just doing that guessing. We use guided reading, and I have it in quotation marks because it gets students into text quicker. We use guided reading because we saw, and again, quotation marks, growth. But did we really? When we go back to think about that chart where 40% or almost 40% of the students in fourth grade are not reading at grade level, we know that we really didn't have success. So let's think about that 3 cueing system that we would do. The book on the left-hand side is a typical guided reading book that you would see kind of towards the end of first grade. And so the text would be, deep inside your ear is a thin membrane called an eardrum. But the student is using meaning, structure, and visual, and they read, deep inside of your ear is a thin memory called an eardrum. I mean, does that make sense? We as adults, we know it doesn't make sense because we don't have memories in our eardrum, right? But a student who doesn't know about eardrums and all of the schema behind it would think, oh, okay, well, we store maybe memories inside of our ear, right? The structure, memory, and membrane kind of look like it sounds like it could go together, and they kind of look familiar, but we can see that it completely changes the meaning of the sentence. So just leaning into that 3 cueing system of meaning, structure, and visual really leads to a breakdown in comprehension as time goes on. We know that we see in kindergarten, you know, the meaning's not that deep in those kinds of texts. In first grade, the meaning isn't at the beginning of the year, isn't that deep. But when we start to get to vocabulary, where the pictures continue to become less supportive, and the vocabulary tends to grow over time, we can see how students get confused and meaning breaks down. So the meaning first approach is unsustainable for figuring out words. Once the reader has made an attempt with the letter and sound, then meaning and context can be used to cross-check, but it's not going to be that meaning first is not what we want to use. When students aren't progressing, the instruction has to change. So just sounding it out, some of these prompts that we've used in the past are really insufficient. Instead of just say sounding it out, we need to be super explicit, we need to model it, and we have to give them lots of opportunities to practice. One of the things I'd ask my students, what do you do when you get stuck with a word? They would say, I just sound it out. I'm like, well, what does that mean? And they would kind of look at you like, well, I don't actually know how to articulate that. So we need to make sure that we're very, very explicit. Sometimes we might, in a text, we may want to lift a word out of the text to look closer at the word and maybe break it into chunks or break it into syllables. And we call that orthographically mapping the word. When we want them to get that word correct, we need to make sure that we orthographically map. So we're going to look at that word, we're going to look for the sounds that are doing what they're supposed to do, and then we're going to verify, yes, in the word want, that vowel sound sounds like an ah, right? Want sounds like an O, right? Yes, you heard that right. We want to make sure that we validate that they're stretching out the sounds and then say, you know, kiss your brain. You heard that sound correctly, but let me show you something. Instead of the O, it's actually an A. So we're going to have to change it, and then we're going to put a heart above it, and then we're going to need to know how and memorize that part of the word by heart. Typically with sight words, what we would say is you have to memorize all of those sight words, all of those high frequency words, but we can lean into the phonics support within that word, and we can see with the word want, 75% of that word is decodable. Only one of those letters needs to be memorized. And so that's what orthographic mapping is about. We're going to show them the correct way to identify, yes, you heard those sounds, and then we'll show them the correct way for spelling that word. So orthographic mapping has kind of a domino effect. Once we start to orthographically map, we actually start to orthographically learn. So it's something that they can continue to grow on their own. It's also important to remember that orthographic mapping isn't just for students who have a language-based learning disability. It helps all students. So it's not just for students who are having a hard time learning, it helps all of your students. Oftentimes we'll see students, they'll be able to read a word, but they won't be able to write the word, right? They won't be able to spell the word. When we do this simultaneously, they'll be able to do that hand in hand. So dyslexia is the most common of the language-based learning disabilities. 70–80% of the students with a language-based learning disability most likely has dyslexia. And it's not a problem of intelligence or laziness or reading the letters backwards. Students with dyslexia have trouble connecting the sounds with that make up the words with the letters that make up the sound. So we're going to talk about decodable texts, okay? So decodable texts are books that rely on that alphabetic principle along with high frequency words. And they recommend 70% of the words that the students are going to encounter are based on the phonics that they've learned so far. So when we look at these two types of books, we have a decodable text on the left-hand side and a level text on the right-hand side. What strategies does a student need to use in order to read these two books? So when we look at the one on the left, there's no picture support for them. So they're going to need to rely on the decoding strategy of stretching out sounds. And some of those words are high frequency words. The words on the book on the right-hand side, they're going to be looking at the pictures, but a lot of those words are not decodable. Which of these books support the learning that short vowel pattern the student might be doing at that time, right? I was always sort of perplexed because before any guided reading, we would always have a little phonics lesson, a little word study lesson, right? And so I would show them about how CBC words work, right? And then I'll say something like this. This is in the old 2015 Deedee Wills. She would say, now, if you come to a word that you don't know, you can try to stretch it out. So let's look at these two words. Which one of those are they going to have a lot of practice with? If I show you here, you can see the book on the right-hand side. They have all of those words are going to rely on that short vowel sound again and again and again and again. But the one on the right-hand side, only two of those words use that short vowel sound. So what we want them to orthographically map and their brains to learn those patterns, they need to see it again and again and again. So when we look at Jan, she has a fat cat, and the cats are always fat in decodable words. Doesn't matter, they're always fat. And they like to take a nap, and sometimes they end up on somebody's lap, right? And somebody pats the cat. It's not great literature. It's not great literature. However, we're asking students to practice that skill again and again and again. Within this page, we have just a few words that are not decodable. The word even though it looks like it's the word a, it's not. It's a schwa, right? We have Jan had a fat cat. We wouldn't say Jan had a fat cat. We would say she had a fat cat. And then we have the word the. Those are there twice. So those are words that they're going to specifically be taught in this book or previous books, right? The word likes and to. So very quickly, the word the and to show up all the time. So those become words that they don't have to decode anymore or memorize. Their brain just automatically knows it. So those are the difference between a decodable text and a leveled text. We want to make sure that we offer multiple opportunities for students to apply the skills that we're teaching them. Initially, students are going to need to slow down and analyze each word, but as they have continued practice with these patterns, they become stored in the brain for easy retrieval. Neither book offers any opportunity for deep thinking, right? Neither of them are going to be deep thinking. So we're going to lean into, in kindergarten, first and second grade, read aloud, shared reading, and classroom conversations to build comprehension. So that's when we do the read aloud. That's where we're going to be building comprehension. Of course, we can ask some comprehension questions with the level text or with the decodable text. But that real big conversation is going to take place during the read aloud, where the teacher is going to do the decoding work and the students are going to do the thinking work. And that's a whole other webinar we're not going to be doing. The assumption is that as long as students are reading, they are growing as a reader is actually really false. The benefits of independent reading is lost when the text does not match their current skills. So the book you're going to put in their hand matches what the students already know about letters and sounds. I don't have a slide here to talk necessarily about ESGI, but it is the most critical tool that I use when I go in and work with students so that I know, hey, what sounds do they know? Are they able to blend? And I can keep all of that data in just one spot. I don't have to have pages and pages and pages of data. I have it all inside of ESGI. It's very easy for me to retrieve it. So I've been a super fan. Even 2015, Deedee Wills was a super fan of ESGI. So we want to make sure that we're building these orthographic highways. We want to make sure that we're asking students to spend time reading books where they can read all of the words. So this becomes a big question then. Are there good books and bad books? No, there's no such thing as a bad book. Well, I mean, maybe there is, but in your classroom, I'm sure you don't have bad books in there. But we're going to want to have students have two bags that they're going to read from. One of them is going to be teacher choice. Those are going to be decodable books. Those are ones that are going to match the student's skills. And we're going to put books in there that we're going to use for instruction in the bag that has books that they're going to read all of the words. The other one is going to be student choice. So maybe they can read some of the words. Maybe they can read none of the words. Maybe they're just reading the pictures. Maybe they got it from the school library. Maybe they got it from your classroom library. Maybe they got it from the book fair, right? So we're going to have two different book bags, one where they can have all of the words that they can read, and the other one where they can maybe read some of the words. So again, the decodable book is where they're going to have all of the words, and some of the words are going to be maybe your old leveled library, maybe classroom books. One of those bags is going to help strengthen the orthographic knowledge, right? The other one is going to help them engage in familiar text and enjoy a wide range of books that they can read. So there are benefits to both of those. We want to make sure we have some controlled choice. We want to give students lots of opportunities to swap text. And then we're going to assess students as they swap books. So we're going to be taking notice of what books are they interested in, what kind of books are they grabbing, and then we can help find books that are going to fall in the decodable range that matches their interests. So let's take a look at what controlled text means. This is a CDC with a silent E set, and we're introducing blends with this as well. And I've highlighted all of the words in this text that are going to be decodable for the students. Did you know that swine and pigs are the same? It's my job to feed the swine. I take the bucket of slop to the pig pen. I admit slop looks gross, but the swine like it. Then I wash and scrape the bucket. Next, I place it on the crate to dry. We fill the bucket again with scraps for slop. So if you notice, some of those words have a little rebus underneath it. It might be hard to see on your screen, but under the word feed, which is like the third line down, there's like a little picture that shows them. Could a student guess that? Yes, they probably could. And then after you wash it, you're going to place it on a crate to, I'm sure they're going to figure out dry is the word. But what we want to do is we don't want to hide guessing. We want to make sure that we're having them decode. So we don't ask them to guess. We're going to ask them to, use that alphabetic principle, the skills that they've learned so far in order to decode that. So for best practices, decodable text should be read daily. They must closely match the phonics skills that the students have taught thus far. Multiple texts are needed, at least 2, so that they can practice that. And then they should be able to reread it to build fluency. And then it should be cumulative practice. So what they're reading today isn't just words with silent E, right? We want to make sure we go back and say, okay, well, we learned the silent E, but we want to also have the CDC pattern so that they are practicing those previously learned skills. And as we move on, maybe like this particular book is one where they are learning the Y as an I. So they'll have words that have the silent E, they'll have CDC, and then Y as I in there as well. Within our decodable text, we do want to build vocabulary. Of course, we do a lot of that with our read aloud. But you can also introduce vocabulary work within your decodable text. So we have a book called Fast Tad where he's running all over the place. He's running here, he's running there, and he's using an app on his phone to know where to go. So we decided to kind of lift that idea and use the word navigate. So while you're using a decodable book, you might think about what's the big idea, or is there a higher level vocabulary word that I can incorporate and teach the students? Even if it doesn't show up in the text, you can still add a higher tiered level vocabulary book to discuss with them within the text. So these are the kind of the revised best practices. Instead of using guided reading, when we come to an unknown word, these are the cues that we should incorporate into our instruction, starting from the left and going to the right. So we're going to ask them, hey, look at the word, say the first sound in the word, say the last sound in the word. Now let's touch each letter as you say the sound. We're going to look at it and we're going to cut it. Is there a bigger word in there, or can we cut it into smaller parts? I'm talking about syllables. I'm going to show you real quickly in this presentation about how we use syllables, and we teach how to decode syllables. And then we're going to check it. So read just the word, read the word in the sentence, now check to make sure it makes sense. So after we've done all of those things, we're going to go back and check them. Teaching children to deliberately use print. This is something from Shifting the Balance by Burgess and Yates. We want to make sure that we're teaching them to deliberately use print. We want to orthographically map words that are beyond their decoding skills. So if it's beyond their decoding skills, we're going to orthographically map it. We don't need to explicitly teach the sight word can, C-A-N, because they can decode it, right? So that's kind of what we're talking about. But words like the, or they, or there, or said, those are words we're going to need to teach explicitly through orthographic mapping. We want to provide an extra reading bag, one where they can read all of the words and one that they can read words in other ways. This is how a small group lesson plan is structured for our things, but you can structure them the same way. First, we're going to take a look again about the phonics skill that we're focusing on, and we're going to do some word building. Okay, so we're going to look closely, we're going to build words. We might even use Elkonin boxes, right? And then we're going to go into the high frequency word section. So the example that I gave before was the word want. We want to make sure that we show them and validate that they are putting down the sounds you hear. And then we're going to show them, excellent, you heard all those sounds, but let me show you something. Instead of the O, it's actually an A. How many of you use that prompt with students when they're asking you, how do you spell? And you just say, oh, just put the sounds you hear, honey. And they say, okay. And then they write the word of, and they write UV. And you say, oh, no, that's not how you spell it. OF is how you spell it, right? And you say, it just doesn't make sense. So instead of doing that, that's a very confusing message for students, right? They're like, you say to put the sounds I hear, and then I put them down and they're wrong. Instead, we're going to show them, yes, those are the sounds. But for the example of the word of, we could say, do you know what? A long time ago, the word of used to be pronounced off, just like get off the bed, right? That's how we used to say it like hundreds of years ago. But over time, our language changed. So now we just say of. And so that's the reason why it's still spelled that way, right? We just tell them why. So that's your high frequency word. Then you need to go into blending practice. What we try to do with our decodable books is the first line, we just changed the first sound. And then the middle line, we changed the ending sound. And then the final line, we're going to change multiple sounds. We want to make sure that we practice from the from the known to the unknown, right? So I think you guys probably are familiar with that. But we want to make sure that they have blending practice every single time they meet with you in small group, because if they can't blend the words, they're not going to be able to read the words. We are going to get away from memorizing those types of things. Again, we have that little vocabulary lesson that I talked about earlier. This is that riveting book that I told you about, FastCAD. So this is what the book looks like. We do have a picture on the cover. We deliberately decided not to illustrate each page because we want to make sure that we don't disguise good guessing with decoding, okay? So Tad ran fast, Tad had a map, Tad ran to the dam, and then everybody, fast Tad. Tad ran to the river, and then we have a rebus there to show river, fast Tad. Tad ran home, fast Tad, and another rebus there. So that's basically what the decodable book would look like. And then we have dictation practice. So we would say, okay, the first word I'd like for you to write is the word map. And they're going to go ahead and put that each letter that they hear into that Elkonin box. And the next one is Tad. And then we're also going to have a sentence dictation. So this is part of that small group instruction. So the sentence we're going to ask them to write is Tad ran to the dam. And then, of course, they'll laugh again about the word dam. But right there, you can practice so many skills. You can see, are they able to encode the word? Decoding is seeing the letters and being able to tell you the word. Now, can they hear the word and encode it? That's one thing that we're doing. We're also practicing sentence writing. So the word Tad, are they starting with a capital letter? Do they have spaces between the words? Are the tall letters tall and the short letters short? Are they putting a period at the end? So in small group, you're right there and you can do some corrections and reteaching if you need to. I worked a lot this year with a first grade classroom, not this year, but the previous year, with a first grade classroom. And, you know, it's stunning when you see how many students don't start a sentence with a capital letter or add punctuation at the end. So we're going to be really purposeful in every lesson to make sure we point out that we've done that. And small group is a great way to reinforce it for those students who need it. And then we can ask them to go in and circle something. So maybe circle all of the A's, the short A's, maybe circle a sight word. And then we're going to ask them to practice with their partner and then read it to their family, somebody in their family. To keep track of it, you know, we have essentially like a running record. So you're going to keep track of what they say and any mistakes that they have. And that's going to really inform your teaching. And again, having a self-correction does not count as an error, but also having the knowledge of, okay, I know that, you know, based on this ESGI, I know that they know all of these sounds, but when they have those sounds and they're trying to blend them together, they're having a hard time doing it, right? So that's a great opportunity for us to look and see, okay, is it a phonics issue or is it a phonemic awareness issue? And then what's my next step? Gives you a lot of great knowledge. So what does this look like in a schedule? I would put in small group is where I would put it during my small group instruction. So you would see that on my schedule here, about between 10:30 and 11:10. I would usually pull 2 small groups, and then I can also do interventions in the afternoon. So that's where I would put it in. So again, here's kind of a blown up version of where this would be. You want to still do whole group instruction. And then you would also do small group. This is going to reinforce the skills that the students have mastered so far. So teaching about syllables is something that I've never really done in kindergarten beyond. I'm just going to check real quick and make sure that I'm doing okay on time, make sure I don't have any messages from the ESGI team. But I wanted to, and typically in kindergarten, we would talk about syllables as count the number of syllables in the word. So when we're trying to break apart a syllable, we might say, you know, for example, if the word is puddle, you know, we might check and see how many times our mouth goes down to determine how many syllables are. We might clap it out. And even though that is a strategy, it's not as explicit as what we should do. So a syllable is a word or a part of word, and it only has one vowel sound. So that's what a syllable is. It's a word or part of a word that only has one vowel sound. And we have outlined 7 different types of syllables. There's a closed syllable, there's an open syllable, then we have a silent E syllable and a bossy R syllable and a vowel T syllable and a consonant LE syllable and a diphthong syllable. So I'm going to kind of walk you through a couple of these. If we were in a live session, we would do a lot of these together. But I'm going to talk to you about a closed syllable and an open syllable. This would really apply, and students should absolutely know this in kindergarten and must know it by the time they exit the school year. So closed syllable, it only has one vowel, and the vowel is shut in. The vowel sound is short. So the example here is cat. So after the vowel, there is a consonant. So that vowel is closed in, it's shut in, or shut the door. And so we can see that again and again with words like ten and bat and moth. So once they understand a closed syllable means that vowel is going to make a short vowel, it's very, very helpful for them, right? You can imagine. And then we have an open syllable where there's only one vowel and the vowel can go. The door is open for them so they can go, and the vowel sound is going to be long. So words like go, flew, and high would be examples of just a few, whole bunch that are there, okay? So the way that we would teach decoding, now this is if you have a student who comes to a word they don't know, okay? And they see, let's say they have the word napkin in there. We're going to go ahead and use that example on the left. So what we would tell them is, now again, they don't know this word. We're not going to tell them that the word is napkin. There's going to be an unknown word for them, and we're going to instruct them on how to take that apart, okay? See the word napkin. We're going to tell them, look for the first two vowels and highlight them, and then label them with the V. So you can see how I've done that in the example there. Look at the letters between the vowels and highlight them, and then label them with a C. Find the pattern and label it. So we can see, we have a closed syllable, N-A-P, right? The vowel is shut in, and then we have another closed syllable, it's shut in, so those are both closed syllables. So now I know it's going to go in, and I'm going to divide in between the consonants. I know it's napkin, okay? Now we have another closed syllable, and this is if it might have a digraph or a blend. We're going to have the same type of idea. So we're going to find the first two vowels. We're going to highlight them and label them with a V. Now we're going to look in between the vowels, and we're going to highlight them, and we're going to label them with a C. Okay, now what are we going to do, right? We have three consonants there, right? So the other one we just divided between the consonants, but now I have three. If there are if there are three or more consonants, look for the letters that go together and then circle them. So we know that TH goes together. So we're going to circle those. And now we know we can divide in between the TH and the T. And we know it's bath, closed syllable, closed syllable. Now we're not going to give a text to a student in our small group that's going to have the word bathtub in there if they don't know digraphs, right? So again, this is going to come up once they've learned digraphs, and then we'll start to introduce multiple syllable words where they can apply that after they've mastered that. So if we were writing a book and it's, they haven't gotten to syllables and bathtub came up, we would put a rebus there because we don't want them to struggle through there, even though they probably could. We just want to make sure that we're really explicit on how they learn this. Again, here's an example for the word basket. So we're going to highlight the two vowels. I want you to kind of mentally do this, right? Label them with a V. Look in between the two vowels, we see those two consonants, and now we can divide in between them. Basket. Okay, that's what we see it in the word velvet. Same idea. We're going to highlight the two vowels, look in between them, highlight the consonants, divide in between the two consonants, and we have two closed syllables. Fabric, same idea. Tulips, now we have something different, right? We're going to look for those two vowels. We're going to highlight them, mark them with a V. Now we just have one consonant. So now we have to kind of use our thinking, right? Is it going to be, are we going to divide T-U-L? Is it going to be tall ips? Or is it going to be two lips? So students are going to have to try both ways before they know if it is an open or a closed syllable. Okay, but that gives them a tool to figure it out. If it's a multiple syllable word, they're going to start from left to right. So they're going to first do the first two vowels, and then once they have those mapped, then they'll look forward for the next ones. For the word robot, again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take a look for those two vowels, then we're going to mark them, we're going to look at the consonant, and then we're going to figure out, is it robot or is it robot? Okay. So we're just going to think, those are just some of the syllables, okay? I didn't go through all of them because I don't think we have that kind of time. But what text are you currently using with beginning readers? If you're not using decodable text, can they be repurposed? And what are some of the advantages and limitations with your current text that you're using? So there we have it. I'm going to go ahead and close that. I think I'm back on the screen. I don't know. I'm going to close that. I would love to see if y'all can even see what I'm talking about. I don't know if I'm still showing my screen. So my ESGI friends, if you could pop in here and let me know if we're okay. And then also if there are any questions that maybe we might have that I can answer for you.
Great. Deedee, we see your home screen of your computer.
Oh my gosh, Hot Mess Express.
No problem.
But
okay.
Maybe I could just make my face. I don't know how to stop sharing.
Okay. So there is a question. How would you recommend doing all this in half-day kindergarten?
That's always a great question. Here's the problem that we have with our half-day kindergarten, right? It's not like when you have half-day kindergarten, you have half the standards that you need to teach, right? So it's sort of like, how do you put 8 great tomatoes in that itty bitty can? That was a commercial from like when I was young. But anyhow, how do you do that? How do you fit, 6 hours of instruction in 3 hours? Something has to give. So what I would do is make sure that I feel like this is essential skills. So I would recommend doing, instead of 2 small groups a day, you would have to just do 1 small group a day. And then you would have to kind of move your schedule around. I do have a blog post that is about how I have my school days scheduled, and then my recommendations for half-day kindergarten. So if anybody, I think, Rochelle, I think we talked about me sending out a few email links so people can find it. But if you are impatient, like I am, you can go to Mrs. Will's Kindergarten and put in the search kindergarten schedule, and you would be able to find that.
All right, ready for a couple more questions?
I am, bring it.
How long is your small group time?
Typically, when I was in the classroom full time, and then the classrooms that I work in now, it's a 40-minute block. So small group, let me just say this, small group reading ELA skills was 40 minutes, and then I would have 40 minutes in the afternoon where I would do math small group. And I would also, I could work in the afternoon, I would do math centers. And so one rotation, I would do an additional ELA group, and then I would do a small group math activity during that time. So I would really have three small reading, writing groups that I would do each day, and 1 small math group I would do each day. Is that confusing? Did I just confuse you? Or do you know what I'm saying? Hopefully it's not confusing.
These are 2 questions that I think could go together. We had the question of, how do you use ESGI for your assessments? And then, do you base your small groups on ability, or how do you make your small groups?
How would ESGI work for assessments? Well, you would want to make sure that you knew which letters they could identify, right? And which sounds they could identify. And we would want to also make sure which sounds can they hear, and tell you which letter makes that sound. So those would be some assessments that you're going to want to do, and you're going to want to know. And keeping that data in ESGI is a fantastic way of doing it. You can collect that data. You may not have students sitting right there with you because in front of the computer screen doing those skills. But as your kid watching, if you say to the students, let's say we want them to write the word TAD, and they're trying to figure out what letter makes that sound, and they do it right there, right? So okay, they can encode that. You can make a note of that. And what I love about ESGI is that you can just like open it up. I don't know exactly what the screen's called, but you can just move things over without having to go through the entire screen, right? You can say, okay, they know all of these sounds. They can hear it, and they can tell me what letter makes that sound. They can also hear it and write that letter. So you can keep that data inside of ESGI. Rochelle, do you know what I'm talking about? You open it up and it has all of the questions, and then you can see the ones they know and the ones they don't know, and then you can move over the ones as they master
the details area under the pipe.
Yeah,
details.
That area. I don't remember what it's called, but I know it when I see it. I know how to get there, but I don't remember what it's called. So that's a great thing to do. I always carry a clipboard around while I'm doing whole group instruction or even small group instruction, so I can make notes of what I'm noticing students do, and then I can add that into ESGI manually. And it's always a great parking spot, because if you knew me, I am a shuffler and stacker, right? I'm always shuffling and stacking papers. And I can't tell you how many times before ESGI, like I remember doing the assessment, like I remember it, and it's on a paper here somewhere, right? And I can't find it. So I loved it that I could go home, I could do report cards from home. I didn't have to carry, 6 suitcases home. I always had it on my computer. So that's how I would use ESGI. To gather data. And then I would pull my small groups based on what I'm noticing. If I'm noticing that I have students who still have not mastered their letters and sounds, then of course that's what I'm going to be having them do. If I'm noticing a group of students who have mastered the short vowel sounds and all of the consonant sounds, but they're having trouble blending, I would pull a small group and have them work together on blending. If I have a student who comes into the school year knowing all of their letters and sounds, and they're blended. We always have them, right? We have a student or two who are already reading when they come into our door. So we need something that we can give to them also, so that they also have a year of growth. So based on that data that we get, we can pull a small group maybe, or maybe just do one-on-one with that student and make sure that they have a book that's going to strengthen their decoding and their orthographic mapping for right where they are at that time of the year.
Okay, what about kids who don't know their letters yet? Would you keep working on letters, or would you start combining letters with decodable text?
If they don't know their letters yet, that's what we need to work on. Do they need to know X or some? They don't do. I guess what I'm saying. Do they need to know every single letter to mastery before they get into decodable books? Maybe not. Because you can do a lot of that reteaching with those initial CDC, but they should have the bulk of their letter identification and, more importantly, the sounds before you get into the decodable book. So there are, like we wrote alphabet books so that they have, it sounds like a predictable sentence. It's going to look a little bit like guided reading, but there's not going to be as much picture support there for them. But we're going to be practicing all of the, they're going to be looking for the letters. So look through this sentence and find all the letter B's, and look for all the letter B's in this sentence, and so forth. So they're strengthening their alphabetic principle. And of course, we're doing lots of activities in small group that's going to strengthen them. So you could do word sorts, you could have them, you can give them a sound and have them, do the path of motion with either their finger and shaving cream or sand or all the different. I happen to have this right here. I haven't opened it up completely yet, but I got this at Target. These little cards and a little sandbox. So that's something that you can have. Anything that's going to have multi-sensory input for them is a great activity for you to do in small group. One of the things that you can do, we want to really make sure that we're practicing that path of motion. Research tells us that path of motion is important. Handwriting is important. 2015 Deedee Wills, we would have had a whole different conversation, but now I know that that is really important. So we would want to make sure that we have them practicing their handwriting. So you can give them handwriting paper, and then underneath it, you can put that screen. You know how like you would get, like your grandma would make you this tissue box holder that with yarn, it would be like needle point and it would be stiff, and there's that plastic canvas. Well, if you slide that plastic canvas under the paper, right? See if I can do this, right? So it's under there. Now they have the handwriting paper and they use a crayon. They can write the letter R again and again, like trace it 3 times, and then they'll say R says R says R says right? So every time they do that, they're practicing the path of motion. They're getting the auditory. They're getting their mouth is going as well. They're getting the tactile from using it. And then as their crayon is going over that canvas, it's going bum, 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 as they're going around. Remove the canvas, they can run their finger over the top of it, and now you have that crayon relief, so it's kind of raised. So that's a different type of input that they're getting. So we want to make sure that we're doing all of these activities that are going to activate the areas of the brain that are meant for reading. So with students with language-based learning issues, usually there's just one area that's working. We need 3 areas to work. So that's why we do these types of lessons, so that we can wake those areas up and build those neural pathways, right? So again, we're going to go ahead. We have the R, it's been on the paper. Now we're running our hand across it to get that feedback. And the last thing that we can do is, now we have that paper, we can put that canvas on top and we can see through it, and then they can do it again. So it's every single time they're getting different type of input on that shape. And of course, we don't want them just running their finger over there. They're just going to say R says R says And I want you to notice my mouth when I say it's not R, right? Look how different our mouths are. We have to really be explicit about sounds. My mouth is very small versus R. Mouth is very different. R is R-U-H, right? So we have to be really, really explicit when we make these sounds. We can't go ba. It should be b. It's a small b. You see all my wrinkles on my face when I say that. But we want to make sure that we are giving the right instruction for students. We can't say ba, we can't say wa. We have to say b, and we have to say okay?
Okay, lots of questions. about your logistics in small groups. Okay, so for instance, would you recommend having more than 4 students in a small group? How long? And what are the other students doing when you have them in the small groups?
Perfect questions. So I'm going to start with the easy one. What are other students doing? They're all doing center work. So you're going to spend the first 4 to 6 weeks of school working on building your routines. And I'm going to say 4 to 6. This isn't like this is how it would be pre-COVID. I know that this year and last year, 4 to 6 weeks may not be enough. You might need 8 to 12 weeks to build your routine so that you have students working independently at centers. One thing that I think is really important is that we need to go slow at the beginning of the year so we can go fast later. So don't rush into doing this if you are going to be battling behaviors all year long. We want to make sure that your centers are engaging, they're sustainable, and students know exactly what's expected of them, and they know exactly what to do, and they're excited about doing centers, all of that, right? That might take you a little longer this year than you would have maybe 3 years ago or 4 years ago. So give yourself grace. 4 to 6 weeks may not be enough. You might need 8 to 12 weeks. That's what all the other students are doing. They're off doing learning centers. How long is that group meeting with you? About 20 minutes. About 20 minutes is about it. And how many students would I have to a group? It depends. Here's what statistically I know. In a group of 20 students, I'm going to have 4 or 5 students who have a language-based learning disability that's probably going to be identified down the road, right? So I'm probably going to have a small group of 4 to 5 students. My neediest group, the ones who need me the most, that needs the most instruction, that group should be the smallest group. Your students who are at grade level or above, you can have a little bit bigger group. You can have 5 or 6 students. And if you have a big group of advanced students, they're typically a little more self-regulated. But the needier the students, the smaller the group. You may have to break that group of 5 into 2 groups, right? 3 and 2, just depending on kind of where they are. Your students will tell you if you're going too fast. Your students will tell you if you're going too fast.
So lots of questions about resources. I know that you probably have your own meaningful center activities or center work bundles. Can you talk about those, please?
Sure. One of the things that before TPT was around, before all of that was around, I always loved making my own center activities. I've gotten better, and you can see it. Like, I'm even so fancy, I know the color codes. You can see on my screen. I know the color codes, right? So I always made my own center activities, something that I always love to do. I like to make it so that, I'm going to go ahead and extend my screen a little bit here so you can actually see me. There we go. That's a little bit better. I like to make it so that the centers are really sustainable. So once I taught them the routine, or let's say it's a game, I don't have to reteach it over and over again. We just swap out the clip art, swap out the skill, and they still play it. So if it's a game, we have a game that we play, and now we were doing it with letters, and now we're doing it with sounds, and now we're doing it with words, but the game structure is the same. So I have a lot of games like that. Same thing with center activities. I don't think I have anything in front of me right now, but I like them to be super predictable, but engaging by having different types of, clip art and themes and things that students really enjoy. So, right now we would be doing apples and fallish kind of things. Maybe in a few weeks we do fire safety kind of images with our center work. So I have a whole webinar called Mastering Centers Like a Boss. And if people go to my blog and go to my webinars, they can catch the free replay, but that's like a whole hour that I could talk about that. So that's one thing. I have written decodable text with Deanna Jump, so we've written those as well. But there are other decodable books out there. What I like about ours is that they follow, it's that spiral review. So if I'm teaching short A now, and the next vowel that I'm going to teach is the E sound, the short E sound, I want to make sure that the books that they're reading are going to reflect the short A and the short E. And as time goes on, now we're doing I, the books need to have the short A, the short E, and the short I, because we have to have that spiral review. Research tells us students need 6 to 8 weeks in order to kind of master these things. And some students are going to need to see it even more than that. Or students with a language-based learning disability might need 40 or 50 exposures before they master that. So we don't need to do something different. We just need to give them more of what research tells us is best for them.
So a lot of questions about purchasing those materials. Is the best place to go to your blog or to your TPT store?
You know what? They can go to, if they would like a coupon code, I can make one for them. I don't have it right now, but I can make one for them. Let me just think of what it would be. That way, when we get off, I'll just go make it real quick. So people want to wait and then they can use that code. How does that sound?
That sounds great. And we'll also put it in the follow-up email. So everyone who's listening and gets the follow-up email could have that as well.
Okay, I'm thinking what it would be. Let's say ESGI. That's fancy, right? I'm super creative. Let's say ESGI, and we'll call it 921 for the date. I'm not very creative, am I? So ESGI 921 will be the code that will give you a 30% discount on anything that you put in your cart from my blog store. But wait, there's more. I'll keep that active through Sunday. So what's that date? Sunday I didn't actually anticipate this. If I did, I would have been a better business person than I currently am. But Sunday is the 25th. So that coupon will expire on the 25th. That way people who are watching in the replay can still get it. So just if you're shopping right now on my blog store, just put it in your cart, but wait, because I have to make the code when we end the presentation. But I will do that before I eat my Chinese food. So I promise. Okay.
How many books do you put into the book bags?
You could put 3 to 4 different books. Whenever you want to have a student have lots of exposure with it. One of the things that we also did is we put them all preloaded to Seesaw, and then we also have a PowerPoint. So if you want to use Google Classroom, you can do that. You can load that PowerPoint into your Google Classroom. But if you're printing out the books, you would want to have at least 2 or 3 books in there. We want to have the one that we're currently working on and the one that they're using to build fluency. So 2 to 3 of those decodable books are great. If you can have more, that's even better. There's something about the success a student has. We look at those decodable books as like, oh, great, there's a fat cat. That's exciting, right? No, it's not. Or a fast cat running around. But when you can actually, if you can watch the students' faces when they are like, I can read every single one of these words, it's magical. So they get excited about it, right? They get, oh, somebody's waking up on the floor over here. But they get excited because they feel successful. They're no longer frustrated because every single word is like a guessing game that they have no idea, how to figure out. So, but typically 2 to 3 books.
Okay, here's one from Sarah. It's a little bit longer. Sarah says, my administrators haven't shifted to SOR yet. Okay. I have the freedom to use decodables. I'll be using yours, but I'm still required to teach 80 high frequency words. Suggestions? Should I just add hearts to the irregular words?
Well, I would, if you have some flexibility, what you might want to do, this is what I did, is I took the whole list and then I started pulling out words that were decodable. So look at the 85 high frequency words, and I am willing to bet at least half of them are decodable. Words like is, it, if, on, no, so, and some of those words. I can't think of any more right now, but start thinking about them. Are these decodable? Can I move those into my phonics instruction? So you restructure them. That's what we did with our whole group instruction. We took 220 words and then we put them into categories of like, oh, you know what? All of these have short vowel sounds. So I'm going to use those in my blending practice. And while I'm teaching short vowel sounds, I'm going to put these words in as words that we use to practice blending. So I don't have to call them like sight words. They're just words that we know how to read because we know how to orthographically map them. Then you can add other words in there. So now you have, you went is a decodable word, right? So you can use that one. Now, how about the word have? Well, that one's not really following the rule. Unless we teach students, you know what? Sometimes when there's a V followed with an E, that vowel is short. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it doesn't because we have the word live and live, right? But sometimes that happens. So you can teach give and have and some other words, I can't think of them right now, all together in one kind of lesson. And even though those are considered irregular, there's a rule that supports them. You can teach, I would teach all of the words that have the same type of word family together. So like all of the AY words, I would teach all of play, say, may, way, away, always. I would teach all of those together. Words like me, be, see, she, he, we, I'm thinking I'm missing some other ones. I would teach all of those together because they're really following the alphabetic principle, right? I would get so frustrated, like 2015 Deedee Wills would get so frustrated because students would know the word we and then they would look at the word be and they'd be like, I don't know that word. If I had taught them open syllables, that'd have been a no-brainer. They're like, okay, well, I know that there's nothing after that, so that's got to be a long vowel. And so it becomes less of a memorization because that memorization is not sustainable. It's more about figuring out how words work. So that's what I would do. I would take your sight word list and I would break them into things that are in common and then think about how can I teach that rule for that. And then some of those are going to be irregular and you're going to pop that heart on top of it. Did I say that right? Yeah, on top of that, whatever that irregular part, and that'll help. I'm going to grab a book really quick that I think is fantastic. It's called Uncovering the Logic of English, and it's written by Denise, I'm going to say Eid, but I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name, E-I-D-E, so I'm not sure if it's Eid or Eid, but it's really, really good about explaining some of these rules so that you have something that you can explain to your students. It's like, it's not a mystery. It's not magical. English does make sense. 86% of the time, words are following the rules. It's just some of those, 14% or 16%, I'm not sure what I just said, are not following the rules completely, but part of that word is still decodable. Like the word said, the AI is not following the rule, but the S and the D are following the rule. So we're going to lean into the phonics to support that.
Can you hold up the book one more time and say the title, please?
Yeah, it's called Uncovering the Logic of English. So this is a great book. Oh, can you see it? I'm getting a glare. But this is a great book that's going to talk about some of the rules in English. This is one of my favorite books. And wait, there's more. I have another book that I think is fantastic. And it's called A Fresh Look at Phonics. And it's written by Wiley Blevins. It's The Common Cause of Failure and 7 Ingredients for Success. And this book is the book that changed really everything for me. You can see I have tabs. If you go through it, you can see I've got it's written up on, I have beat this book, carried it around everywhere. So A Fresh Look at Phonics is written by Wiley Blevins, and it really does open your mind to the way things need to be and where we've kind of fallen short. So I highly recommend. These are my 2 books that I would order again if they got lost. Do you know how you have those books? Like sometimes you can't find it and then you order another one and then you have 2. That may have happened to me before. So these are those books. So those are a couple of them. If your principal is not on board with the science of reading, one of the things that I do is I work with administrators all the time. So if you want to have a phone call, if you're like, gosh, if only they could hear this or be ready for this, I can do a Zoom call with them. I do that all the time. So if that's something that would be helpful, that's great. Otherwise, on my blog, and I know ESGI is going to send out some links for that, but if you put in the science of reading, I have something that's printable that you can print, and it'll help give you the research behind why we need to change the way we've been teaching. It might help you feel a little more empowered to go talk to your administrator. So it's free on my blog. It's like, I don't know, 12 pages, something like that. So you can print it out and look at it, or just sleep with it under your pillow, whatever makes you happy. But sometimes you need to have the why, right? In addition to the how. And sometimes your administrators need to know the why. So that's available to you.
So wise. We are so thankful. There's so many great comments about what they learned today. So I can't wait to send these to you so you can see everyone's question and answer.